welcome, Chief Freshly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we want to talk about some new developments in the police department, some major new developments actually, particularly in community policing, which I know that you've been really making the commitment to have happen in our community. So maybe you can tell us about, I understand you have an award, which is, you know, a very prestigious award from a state agency.
Right. To start, thank you for recognizing that we are embracing community policing, and we're revisiting the implementation of it. So we did start with infusing community policing in our officers' training annually. They all come together and we rotate all of our officers through what we call AOT, Advanced Officer Training. So we have infused the community policing concepts, and we've customized them, of course, to our community, to better serve our community. And having officers, approach calls with the goal of resolving a problem. And that's been very, very helpful. Also, of course, included in community policing is the community, right?
Right.
So we involved community members, and we make sure that they have a voice. So with that, there are also some special projects that we focus on, one of which was Closter Park. And what we did is we did an analysis of the area, the crime surrounding the park, and we took a look at some of the blight and some of the issues that we've been hearing. So we don't just go solely by word of mouth or solely by what our crime reports tell us. We consider all things when we analyze a problem. So with that, our team set out to, address some issues. And while they were there, they found that children and families were no longer utilizing the park as much as they had been, which is a huge concern.
Right.
Because we know that that's quality of life, and our taxpayers, of course, pay into services like having parks maintained and groomed, and then for us to find that they're not enjoying the parks, we need to know why. So what we learned is there was some drug dealing going on, as well as some blight associated with a business that was not reputable. We did an investigation and found that it was pretty much a front for some illicit drug sales. So we addressed that issue, cleaned up the park, celebrated with the residents, and invited them back, and they've been back since. So projects like these, we continue to monitor to make sure that we keep our finger on the pulse of things. And residents are sometimes reluctant to call police. We've had an increase in calls and cooperation and people willing to step forward and take charge of their neighborhood. And really that's what community policing is all about.
Right.
You had asked about the award. So the park that I cited, that was one piece of the submission. The other piece or pieces include the fact that we implemented community policing and that we were very open and transparent about discussing this as an educational piece for our officers to kind of relearn. So sometimes when things get tight and cities' budgets dwindle, which we all experience pretty much during recession, we kind of lose track of what's really important. And it's not just responding to calls, it's taking a big step back and looking at the bigger picture and what do the residents really want and need. The judge from the state organization that has created this award came to Salinas. First thing he did is, without announcing, he went out to Closter Park and he talked to people. And he made his own observations. And then he came to our police department and interviewed some of the members of our department to find out how we approach this and were we really doing what we said that we were doing. So that judge returns his findings to a panel, and they voted on us, not only as finalists, but we came out #1 in the state of California for 2019. So we are very pleased.
Yeah. That's just a great story because just a few years ago, community policing was an idea. And here you've managed to change a culture that was used to doing policing a much different way, maybe more traditional, a less community engagement, less community co-producing of the solution, and less building the trust. So it's a huge shift for your department, and congratulations to you.
Well,
It
thank
speaks
you.
volumes.
Well, of course, it's a team approach. So
Yeah.
everything we do is a team approach. Not one individual is saddled with, any of these task assignments or concepts. So, I have to give a lot of credit to the Assistant Chief, Roberto Felice, who's over investigations, because he spearheaded most of the project himself with a team of officers and community service officers as well.
So you're in a leadership position actually in the state and among police agencies in this full move, big shift to community policing. So how do you sort of make the accountability work in that kind of a system? Are officers assigned specific projects, areas, shifts? How does that work so there's an accountability factor on
Right.
how you measure success?
Right. Well, with the measurement of success, we have to make sure that they have the tools to succeed.
Right.
So we're still working on an empowerment component to this, and that is, as you mentioned, traditional policing, mainstream policing across the country experienced traditional policing for quite a long time. So community policing really started in the early 80s. And with that, the concept has not changed in that it has always supported and encouraged that every single officer and employee, whether you're working behind a desk or whether you're an investigator working the front office or in the field in a patrol car, that they are empowered to make decisions, that they're empowered to use creativity.
Right.
So in measuring that, we have a component that's, built into their personnel evaluation, but I think more importantly, making sure that it's going, up and down, so that the boots on the ground, as well as the brass, the supervisors, sergeants, commanders, and chiefs, from top to bottom, bottom to top, come together. So with that, we've started something called STEER, and that is our Strategic Information Exchange and Response. So it's not just the officers going out and willy-nilly and doing whatever they feel
Right.
that day, in addition to responding to calls and emergencies. But they also are required to come to the table with me. In most cases, I am present at the table unless absolutely not available that day. But we have a schedule in which all commanders come together with us, and we go face to face and we talk about what's going on, what's been happening in your district, what's been happening on your watch. We the face-to-face component I feel very strongly about, because without that, without everyone in the room, we only know the information we've exchanged casually. We don't know what we have missed. We don't know who has shared key information or potentially key information that could help solve a crime or address an issue better. So we all come to the table with this ongoing approach that I call STEER. And it's kind of a homegrown, it's very much modeled after CompStat, which for the most part has had
Right.
a lot of success nationally as well as globally. But I didn't want to have the CompStat stigma,
Right.
because there have been some other unintended or maybe intended consequences that come with the CompStat.
Right.
I guess we could call it stigma.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do
Right.
that to our commanders who have been working hard at the Salinas Police Department in service to this communities for so long, and in most cases for decades. I didn't want to make them feel as though this was an aggressive kind of in-your-face approach to management and
Right.
accountability. So it's more inclusive. It's allowing our commanders an opportunity to show us everything they've got, the things that they've been thinking of, what it is that they've observed presently as in real time as possible, and then of course taking a step back and being toward the more creative side. Well, what have you been thinking up all of these years? What types of approaches would you like to try? So it's very inclusive. It's no one gets blamed or criticized. We just want to value everyone's opinion at the table,
Right.
and then we create a plan, strategic approach to how we're going to address the issue that is the most salient at that meeting, and then we deploy that plan. So at the following meeting, everyone comes back and we discuss how things worked. How did things work out? Have we been able to lower the car burglaries, for example, in a particular neighborhood or multiple neighborhoods, or whatever the crime might be? So if we haven't been completely successful in the approach that we decided we would try, then we discuss that and we come up with a way to tweak the plan and reapply it.
So what's the next step, Adele, in the next chapter of community policing in our city?
Well, at this time, because we're still, don't want to say that we're in an introductory phase, but it's been well known and proven for, since the 80s, as I mentioned, since the onset of this era of policing that we're in, that it takes a very long time for police personnel to really understand and get to a level of comfort about applying the approach of community policing. So from here, we're in this transitionary phase, and we're going to keep applying this, and we're going to keep celebrating our successes. So what I hope to see more of in the future with the community's involvement and help is, one, we make an attempt to help the majority, or if not all, of our community better understand their role in community policing and how valuable their contributions are. And then moving forward, I'd like to see more neighborhood watch programs, or whatever it is that we want to call them. But we want to kind of get things down to a more micro level. We want to decentralize, and we want our neighborhoods to say, we can do this on our own. Police department, City of Salinas, can you help us out the first year? Can you give us a little coaching, and then we'll take it from here? And that's what we would like to see, and that is our focus at this time.
You think it's working?
Actually, I do. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buzz, and we have some, some residents in particular who are very passionate about this, about having their own neighborhood meetings, and you get to be the boss of your own neighborhood, which I think is great. And I just hope that we can continue to support them, and that they recognize that no one gets left out, and so in the future, probably in the next year or two, we'd really like to get a registry that we can share, not the personal parts of the information, but just kind of an overlay, mapping out, our coverage and how well connected, and how widespread this footprint actually is.
Great. So let me turn to another award you received.
Oh.
You personally. Child Abuse and Prevention Council gave you a very prestigious award and recognize you for your efforts in the whole area and system of trying to improve our reaction and support of preventing child abuse and dealing with it as a community. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the award and what that means to you.
Yeah, well, that was an absolute honor, and it's pretty amazing that when you don't think people are really watching and paying attention, they are. So the award was actually for peace. It was the Community Peace Award.
Wow.
And I'm sure much of that had to do, again, although my name is singled out on that award, it really is a team approach. You know, we have an amazing team, and they're doing a lot of great work. So I believe this had to do with lowering our violent crime rate, which we're very happy with. You know, I've always said since I've been here in Salinas that one homicide is one too many.
Right.
So cops traditionally are a little superstitious. We don't like to talk about, or should I say celebrate too much when violent crime is down, and we've really, really reduced homicides. But the fact is we have seriously impacted violent crime. So we're seeing much, much less gang activity, which is truly something to celebrate, but it's for our entire community to celebrate, because I do believe the community is stepping forward and they're speaking up. We get more calls now when gunshots are fired, regardless of whether they're fired in the air or at a parked vehicle. We're getting calls and we're getting people who want to tell us about it. So that's a huge step for us. We're very pleased. And you know, really I think this speaks to it's time to stop thinking about our city as a violent city. Because
There's a different narrative now, I think.
there's a different narrative, and that's so exciting. It's really what we're working towards collectively as a city, right, with our community members. And we want to change that dialogue. We want to make sure that we're celebrating Salinas and all it has to offer, and that quality of life is good. And the last thing we need to be thinking about is crime. That's our goal, is to remove that fear or concern or worry from our residents, from the minds of our residents.
Yeah, it's particularly important because it's the people and how they believe their quality of life is affected, or their level of they believe their quality of life is at.
Right.
And that speaks to how well they think all of us are doing our jobs together, whether it's a neighborhood to neighborhood, or it's police with the neighborhoods, or community policing, or anything else that City Hall is doing. Yeah,
That's
so
right.
it's really, and that's so hard to do in a city
It is.
that's had a very, tough reputation over the years.
Coupled with, Ray, the fact that we know we often don't hear from residents until there's a problem. So
Right.
I think it's important we keep this conversation going, and we remind people that Salinas is a great place. We remind them that this is a safe city.
Right.
We remind them that we should be celebrating our wins, even when they're small wins, and we just keep moving forward until we're so pleased with our quality of life that we're not in fix-it mode anymore.
Yeah.
It'd be great to be in a maintenance mode.
Right.
And
Right.
but I think it is important that we recognize that people come to us typically when there's a problem, not when everything's great.
Right.
So we just have to keep the conversation going.
Right. Well, let me switch to some new initiatives that you're undertaking, and we've heard about a little bit. Tell us about those programs and how you and why you initiated those two different or program efforts.
So HOT is, it stands for Homeless Outreach Team. A HOT officer primarily is not concerned with enforcing violations, which kind of throws people off.
Right.
And not all of our community might appreciate that either. His or her job is to develop a relationship with people who live on the streets.
Yeah.
And after doing that, to kind of observe, who's out here that might be ready for some help. Who's ready? So, and you can only do that if you get to know someone. You can't just walk flat up and start an interview without having a relationship, or without that person knowing what you're about, where you're coming from, and trusting you. So at this time, we've taken this first step, this first phase in the model, and we have implemented it. We went through a formal selection process. We had some officers who actually wanted to do this, knowing full well that their initial stage and perhaps a year or more, who know, years even, could be only in Chinatown.
Yeah.
Depending on the results, if we're, depending on the timeline of our impact. So the competition went well. We selected an officer, and he's been working in Chinatown ever since, because we know that's where our greatest concentration of homelessness is in the city of Salinas. And also because we get reports that we've had historic, drug sales and, different ailments there on the street, illicit drugs. So, and a lot of camping, which is a problem because we're trying to develop in the area. And so, I hear complaints from every spectrum, as do you, right? So we wanted to do our part as police, recognizing this is not a police problem. It's certainly not exclusively one entity's problem. It's for all of us.
The other program is Spark, right? And that's
Spark.
Tell us about that and what.
Now this is a homegrown. This is an original, authentic program. We've been trying to find different ways that we can engage young people. We're fortunate in that we're so welcomed by teachers and different children around the city. It's great that we're welcome. Children understand, I think, intuitively, that police are there to help them, that we're their guardians, and we want to be there for them as mentors. But we had so much trouble with this school resource officer program implementation, and it not being a popular idea. Our timing was unfortunate because of well, I like to call it rhetoric, but in fact there is research that was not in favor of school resource officer programs. And that research was pretty much all we heard about for a while. And so we thought, well, we've got to find another way. We've got to find another way to reach young people, those critical years when they move on into middle school and when they move on into high school. So with this in mind, and I was talking this up a lot at the police department, but completely separate from this idea, we have a commander and an officer who were chatting it up about how important it is that teenagers need to learn how to drive better, that they're not learning how to drive well enough to go out into the community and get their license, and before you know it, they're behind the wheel of a multi-thousand-pound machine. And so, with that, we wanted to make sure we kept teenagers safe as, they get through these years of, studying for their driver's license. Well, one of our commanders who has a child of his own who had recently gotten a driver's license came and said, they just aren't learning enough. This is really scary stuff as a parent. So he thought, why don't we get involved in teaching students how to drive? And I thought, So at first, I was a little concerned because I thought, well, what would our role be? So ultimately, he and I sat down, we talked and talked and talked, and he felt very, very strongly about getting teenagers behind the wheel of police cars.
Wow.
I said, are you serious? That's like me trying to be a Blue Angel for a day. It's not going to work. And he said, no, I have a plan. And so, we vetted out quite a bit, and we came up with something called Spark. And the reason for this is I wasn't going to give up what I wanted, and
Right.
he wasn't going to give up what he wanted. So we melded it together. And I said, look, if we're going to invest this much time in these students, and we're going to put them behind the wheel of police cars and teach them how to be safely, and certain maneuvers and skills that we learn in our police training that can be very, very valuable at a younger age, especially before they develop bad habits. Then I want, we've got this captive audience.
Right.
Why don't we do more with it? Why don't we provide an opportunity to be mentors to them and talk about some pretty serious topics that they may have checked out on when they hear them around school or at home or whatever. So we decided to infuse, some role modeling, and so we talked to them about, topics like what it is to be a real man. It doesn't mean that you have to assert yourself in a bully type way. It doesn't mean you have to manhandle someone. It means let's talk about being a gentleman.
Right.
Let's talk about making responsible choices. And then so there's this one evening. What we do is we separate the boys from the girls. And that's not a popular idea with me, but this was something that I felt was important, because we know that girls learn differently and much, much better when they're given certain topics where they're exclusively with their own sex.
Yeah.
So we talked to them about self-identity,
Yeah.
awareness, and making good choices. So we've gotten help. We have a subject matter expert who talks to the boys. I consider myself a subject matter expert who talks to the young women, and it's an actual, it's a very nice encounter. So we look forward to many, many more Spark
Good.
sessions. Salinas Police, accountability, responsibility, and knowledge is the acronym.
Oh, hard to remember all that.
It is, and one of our newer sergeants came up with it. We were all scratching our heads trying to figure out what we're going to call this, and we
Yeah.
knew it needed to be an acronym, right?
Right.
So Spark it is.
Spark, great. Well, finally, and just want to thank you for being a guest. It's always a pleasure and enlightening. So many things going on with our police department and your leadership, and you could see the changes in the community, just how people react. It's very positive, actually. So you can see just, it may be anecdotal, and I think you're probably capturing that in some data set or something like that, so to keep and use in your future meetings and your analysis. But again, it's a pleasure to have you here, Adele.
My pleasure.
And the police department is doing a terrific job under your leadership. And thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate your leadership as well.